I think I didn't really make the point about education and the 4A framework. So that is also part of the international law on realizing the right to education. So how do we know that we realize a child's right to education? So in terms of a treaty, the Covenant on Economic, Social and Cultural Rights, there's a general comment written on it, and this serves as a benchmark. So if education is available, in other words, are there books, are there material, is the teacher or parent properly equipped, education is available. I think the international law can be refined, but that is an academic issue. Then, is education accessible? Obviously, a lot of homeschool children are in homeschools because mainstream education is not really accessible for many reasons, such as they live far on a farm or the child has special needs, and mainstream education becomes inaccessible to that child. So homeschooling, in a sense, make education very accessible for a lot of children. Then I think where a lot of the issues in these debates are is education acceptable and adaptable. And I do think homeschooling makes education adaptable to the needs of specific children, especially children with special needs. And then the main question is it acceptable? And that deals with the standards, which is also not that difficult to determine eventually, because you just simply need to meet the standard of the state, which is not very high in South Africa. So in that regard, if you do those things, you realize the best interest of, you realize the right to education, and we can deduct from that that you act in the best interest of the child.
Maybe just something for me to highlight. I think it's really important that we look at the emotional well-being of children. And there are so many things in mainstream schools that can actually become a problem for children. And that's why we need social workers in mainstream schools. But if it's a child that is in a home school, they have the same needs. And what we don't always recognize is that children do experience various forms of trauma as they go through life. And that influences their education. So even as homeschoolers, I think it is important to know your child, and if a child needs any support when it comes to emotional health and well-being, that is also provided. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much to the panel members. So I'm going to allow you to ask questions. There's a roving mic there. So you just raise your hand and you ask your questions. So I will take 3 questions for the first round, and then allow the next round as the time allow me. All right, you can raise your hand and ask them a question. Here are the panel members ready for you. Okay, here's the first hand, the second hand. Here's the second hand there. Then the third one. Thank you very much. We have 3. Okay, can go.
Hi, my name is Malan. I want to ask, to what extent are parental rights defended and protected in determining what's in the best interest of a child? Because 20 years ago, we lived in a world where people agreed on a lot of basic things. What is a man? What is a woman? Things that nobody ever thought would be questioned. Today we live in a world where everybody has a different opinion on things that are really fundamental. If you look at those basic human rights, protecting somebody's dignity, etc., etc. I can stand up and say, I'm a Christian, I come from a biblical worldview, and this is how I see it. And the next person will stand up and say, I'm woke, and your biblical view invalidates people's dignity, it's disrespectful, etc., etc. Every single point on that PowerPoint will be contested. No, but people don't agree on it. So my question is, children belong to parents. God gave children to parents. And for the state to arrive and argue with me as a parent on what's in the best interest of my own child, as if their opinion is just as valid as mine, is absurd, because we are not going to agree. So to what extent are parental rights protected, that we actually recognize that the parent is the one that knows what's best for his child?
Okay, can you tell us your name so that maybe they might want to address you by your name?
I mentioned it, I'll mention it again.
Oh,
Malan.
you did, okay. All right, thank you. All right, second question.
Professor Malan, Professor Reineke, sorry, Rob. I just wanted to know, when you spoke about homeschools, you talk about just individual children or children at home, or do you also mean cottage schools or where people gather? What was your reference to homeschools? And the reason why I'm asking it is that, because we find that there's a lot of issues with regards to children not getting education at their own homes, but at home schools. So which might be a problem for you, is also actually for true home educators.
Okay, thank you very much. I hope you had the question. Right, then let's get the last question, and then I'll ask the panel members to respond.
Thank you. My name is Sean Green. The question, I think, is more directed to Prof. Mariette. And I think you have kind of answered the question already in a way that is sort of presumed. I'd like a definition for the child. When you hear officials speaking, we've been to so many presentations and listened to so many people speaking on the subject and referring to the best interests of the child. When an official is speaking, that official often, I think, talks about the child as if the child is this vague idea of all the children in the country. But when a parent is speaking about the child, the parent is talking about Benjamin, or I am talking about Jason. I'm talking about my child. Would I be correct to understand that the best interest of the child is referring to a child that's actually got a name? It's one of my children. So just some clarity on who is this, the child?
All right, thank you very much. Okay, panel members, then we can respond to the question. All right.
Okay, so the question, if I understand it correct, Milana, is children belong to parents and they know what is in the best interest of their children. And the state does not have a right to tell parents what they should do and what they should not do. Okay, so the legal answer to this is, and it starts with the idea that children doesn't belong to anyone. Children are individual right bearers. So although I might think it is my children, they have individual rights. And that we saw in the S versus M case, where it was about a parent that need to be sentenced, etc. And the Constitution, and normally in law we say the personal circumstances of this transgressor is X, Y, and Z. And they said personal circumstances of this child, of this offender mother, is that she has 3 children. And the court made it abundantly clear and said, children is not a personal circumstance of their parents. They are individuals. And we see it in the Constitution that says everyone has a right to dignity. Everyone has a right to equality. Not everyone that is 18 years old has a right to this. So number one, we have to remember that children are individual right bearers. So parents are at liberty to always exercise their rights to the point where their exercising of their rights start to infringe on the rights of the child. And there we will have a balancing of rights. So, you as a parent have the right to discipline your child. But the moment that the way that you discipline your child start to infringe on the dignity of your child, start to infringe on the safety of your child, you don't have that right anymore. And at that point, where parents' rights start to infringe on the rights of children, the state has an obligation in terms of Section 7 of the Constitution that says the state has an obligation to respect, protect, promote, and fulfill the rights of everyone. So the state has an obligation to make sure that the child's right to dignity is respected, protected, promoted, fulfilled, that the child's right to education is respected, protected, promoted, and fulfilled. If the state fails to do it, and I'm going to use a broad example, if the state fails to do it, and we see it often when children are abused, who are the first people that they nail? The social workers. They didn't act fast enough, etc., and they didn't do this, and they didn't protect the child. Then we expect the state to step in and protect them. So, and the same with education. If parents do not realize children's rights properly, the state has an obligation, and the risk is, for the state, is in 18 years from now, a child can go and say, okay, you didn't regulate homeschooling properly, you didn't protect and promote my rights while I was a child, and I didn't get a proper education. Then every child can actually sue the state for not respecting, protecting, and promoting their rights while they were children. So in that regard, you can exercise your rights and be the parent, the best you want to be, but the state has an obligation, and we as a society actually expect the state to step in. Why are we concerned about these things? The moment that someone in society see, but this child never goes to school, what does society do? They go to the authorities and expect the authorities to investigate, why is this child not in school? So our society also expects us and the state to step in and make sure that there where parents fail, that we ensure that children will be protected and promoted. And then as far as your question is concerned, I think when we talk about the child, it's generic, it's someone under the age of 18. But when we talk about the best interest of the child, and when we say when can the state step in, etc., it is always individualized. Because every child is a unique person. My child might not survive homeschooling, not might. My child will not survive homeschooling, okay? But it is in the best interest of your child not to be in a public school. So in both instances, we act in the best interest of a child with a name, and we use different criteria, etc., but we come to the solution, what is in the best interest of a particular child, which is contextualized. And I think that is, why lists of factors actually create a lot of concern because people tend to start to focus on one factor or two factors. But in the end, to determine the best interest of the child is like trying to bake a cake. What is in the best interest? For a chocolate cake, you are going to use this amount of cacao. For a vanilla cake, you will not use cacao. So for every child to determine what is in their best interest, we will use different ingredients because their realities are different. So it is about individualization.
If I can maybe just add to what Mariette said on the parental rights. I think it's really important that as a parent we make sure that we care for our child, and that's why I highlighted that specific one. If you care for your child and you teach them socially acceptable behavior and you look holistically at your child and you ensure that your child is developed on a religious level, on a mental level, all those various areas of a person's life, then I think you're actually ensuring that you care. And if that's the case, you are doing what you're supposed to do, and well, things happen these days that you wouldn't expect, but the fact of the matter is that from the perspective of someone that's supposed to stand in for children, such as social workers, there wouldn't be any problems. And Mariette, I think, added to the rest of them. Then the question on cottage schools and individuals. I think the principles is for everyone. So it doesn't matter if it's one child or a group of children. The principles stay the same. So, I mean, we have the same problem in mainstream schools where we have bullying, for example. So if there's a few children in a homeschooling environment and there's a bully, then you need to protect the other children from that bully. Those of you that would read the work that Mariette and I do, we work quite a lot on what we call restorative school discipline. And I would actually think that it will work quite well in a homeschool environment, especially with what I've learned in the last day or so, where we work from the perspective of values, where we work from the perspective of creating a culture of not just learning, but looking after each other, protecting each other, considering other people. All those things that we would expect to teach our children, especially if you do that from a biblical perspective. All the values that we see in the Bible, we actually see in good discipline. So I don't know if that answers the question.
It does answer, although teachers try to manage people, whereas some people that start cottage schools doesn't necessarily, do well with that management in the school area or whatever. So I was wondering, because of the legal aspect is education at your own level.
I mean, you say that teachers are trying to deal with children. Sometimes I wonder about that. They might be able to teach them something, but there are many teachers that don't know how to deal with children, especially with troubled children. But the fact of the matter is, and even if we look at the Children's Act, you will actually see that just by providing recreation for children, you need to ensure that you protect them, that you have things in place to ensure that on all these levels they are protected. So unfortunately, it's not my area of expertise, but I think the principle will be the same. The protection is important and that you have to put things in place to do that. I don't know if there's maybe...
Okay, thank you very much, panel members. I'm coming to you, Uda. We don't have enough time. I'm just left with 4 minutes. You can't believe, and my panel members have a lot of information to share with you. You want to ask a lot of questions. But Uda, what are the main voices from some home scholars that you can tell us about and how to handle these voices? Okay.
Do you want the voices?
Children who are attending, how to handle them. Yeah.
Okay, so I think loosely there are three views. There are the mixed view that would more say like parents know the state have some say, and it's kind of a balancing of those various voices into the child's, or input into the child. Then a second voice would be strongly parental focused, so the parent knows what is in the best interest of the child. And then I think the third big voice is the one that says the child has the say in what's in the best interest of the child. And I think the challenge with all of them is to balance that into, and to some extent, I think that is something that I wanted to say on Malan's question, is to know how your view fits into what the law actually says. Because we can have very strong personal convictions to either one of these three or another view on the best interest of the child, but it's important to know which of those views are my personal views and is not actually in the law, and which are legal rights. So we can advocate for some of my personal views to be adapted into law, but you shouldn't assume that your personal views are protected by law and is realized as a right in the Constitution. So you do need to make sure which are the things that you call rights are legal rights, and which would you say, like as a Christian I would say God-given rights. That is not necessarily in law. And then if I can just quickly say something, if you want to protect a right, my father used to say, you protect it by using it. If you don't use it, you lose it. That is, so caring, doing it properly, but then also doing it, exercising your right.
Thank you very much, Uda. I wanted to give you another chance for the second round, but unfortunately, our time is over. It's already, but I just want to give them just 30 seconds for their last words before we leave the what you call the panel. Let me start with you as we are closing this session.
I think the fact that you want to know what is in the best interest of your child is already an indication that you are acting in the best interest of your child. You are doing fine.
Mariette now actually just said what I wanted to say. Isn't it? I really think it's important to understand that if you do the right thing, then you have nothing to worry about. The state only intervenes when people don't do what's in the best interest of their children. So I can tell you the load that social workers have out there. If they go to a home and they see things are fine, they are as happy as can be because they know I don't need to worry about this family. So you don't need to worry about that.
I think with respect to Prof. Rolf, in homeschooling we often sit with a situation where the officials don't always only intervene where there's a problem, because they look through the view of a school. So they would say it's in the best interest of your child to have like like where you mark when somebody is present or not. And we're like, the kid lives at home, you know. So what I want to say on that is, don't be put off from doing what is in your best interest of your child because some official tells you You should have a roster, or you should have a timetable. Do what is in the best interest of your child and fight for it. That is what it means to have that, to use that parental right. You know, and maybe you got it wrong, but then you need to you need to assume that you know something about your child, and you need to fight for that. Okay. And then somebody else needs to come and say, no, here's clear proof that it is not. Yeah, that's what I want to do.
Thank you very much, Uda. I really appreciate your time as a panel member, and also to Prof. Rolf Reineck. Thank you very much for sharing your expertise with all of us. And also Prof. Mariette Reineck, also thank you very much. And thank you to all of you who have been in the audience. You've been a good audience. Just that we didn't have enough time for the second round. But during breaks and all that, you can talk to them and ask more questions. Thank you very much.